I'm not sure it'd necessarily be that surprising. And I think a lot with these second-round picks, you just don't have the roster space to have all these guys come. And not only the roster space, but you don't have, the playing time to really be able to evaluate them and grow them. So I do think at some point there is going to be some, accumulation or some consolidation of assets, using what they've acquired to go get the guys that they want. So if there's a player who falls, I could see it happening. Certainly, you're not looking at the 23 pick as a potential superstar. But I think there's probably going to be some players in that draft that, I think there's, especially with the international guys that withdrew from the draft, I think the second round is a little bit weaker than maybe some were hoping for. So maybe if you can get up in that 23 guy, maybe a guy like Kevon Looney falls, something of that sort. I think that's a possibility. Yeah.
Give me your thoughts on the Celtics offer. Marcus Smart, 16-28 for Noel, and the number 3 pick. Now, don't laugh. I know that might be your initial reaction, but is it as off the wall as it sounds?
Yeah, it's off the wall. To me, that's the type of offer that's made to start dialogue. That's basically the Celtics saying that they're interested in Nerlens Noel and they're interested in the number 3 pick. I wouldn't read any more into that. To me, Nerlens Noel is a better long-term prospect than Marcus Smart, and the number 3 pick is certainly worth far more than number 28 and the number 16 pick. I would, that to me is nothing more than a report that the Sixers and the Celtics are talking. The particulars of that I don't think have much of a chance of happening.
Derek, if you take Noel out of the deal and it's just the 3rd pick, Smart 16-28 for 3, does that make any more sense?
I still wouldn't do it. I think the number 3 pick is worth more than Marcus Smart, and the 16 and 28 pick to me don't move the needle in that regard. If you're looking at the number 3 pick as a chance to get a real franchise cornerstone, in the 16 and the 28, they just don't have a whole lot of sway in that. So if I'm looking at it, I'm basically looking at, do I think D'Angelo Russell is better prospect than Marcus Smart? Yes. Do I think, Emmanuel Mudiay is a better prospect than Marcus Smart? I want to throw that out there for you since I know you want a Mudiay call out. Yes, I do. I would even take Kristaps Porzingis over Marcus Smart. So no, I don't. To me, I wouldn't have interest in that deal, even if you take Nerlens Noel out.
I would agree. I'm not interested in Smart either. The only thing I guess you'd say, if Sam Hinkie likes Smart and says, I like him better than the 2 points, and 16-28, and some of my assets from next year can move me up to get me somebody that could be either falling or someone that they have an eye on, a Hezonja, maybe Mudiay if he falls a little bit, or a Justice Winslow. I guess that would be one way, but even that, I think Smart just doesn't move the needle for me. I can't imagine he moves the needle for them. He was the 6th pick last year. I don't know how much you recall of the Sixers, interest in him last year, but was he a name that the Sixers did have interest in last year?
Yeah, well, he was a name that was connected. And to be clear, I don't completely hate Marcus Smart, the prospect. In fact, I kind of like him. I just like, I like D'Angelo Russell. I think he's on another level. But Marcus Smart's the type that, because of his defense, his ability to generate steals, and his ability to contribute, all around, scoring the basketball, rebounding, and like I said, defense. He rated out very well on a lot of statistical models that we all kind of assume that Sam Hinkie, would subscribe to. So I don't think it's impossible that there is interest from the Sixers and Marcus Smart. I just think the price is way too high at this point. And the 16, that's just not close enough. If you're trading down a little bit less to maybe 7 or 8, then I think that would be more feasible. But if you're looking at a guy like even Justice Winslow, he's not falling to 16 in this draft. So it's just, to me, that's too far of a drop.
Where does the draft drop off for you?
I would say about the 8 range, 8, 9. After you get past the Mario Hezonja, Justice Winslow, Stanley Johnson wing group, that's when I think it starts dropping off. I think Willie Cauley-Stein is in that group as well, but I don't think the Sixers, because of Nerlens Noel, would have a whole lot of interest in Cauley-Stein. So I think once you get past the Justice Winslow, Hezonja, Stanley Johnson range, really the 8 to 9 range is when I think it starts dropping.
Does taking a guy with a higher ceiling make more sense for the Sixers? I know a lot of people like Russell. He's described as a polished point guard, the most ready guy. But does it make sense for them to take the guy that is – it's like the Phillies took Aaron Nola, the most ready guy. They didn't need him. He's now ready to pitch in the big leagues, but they don't want to use him because of his service time crap. So do the Sixers fall in the same kind of situation here where they don't want to take the guy that's ready now but maybe a guy with a higher ceiling? Well,
I think they are going to pursue the guy with the highest ceiling. I don't think they really care all that much about being ready now and year one contributions. Not that they don't care about year one contributions, but I don't think they're going to prioritize it over years 2 through 9. So no, I think they're going to go for the guy with the highest upside, and I think Russell has that kind of upside as well. I think there's a little bit more risk in Russell. A lot of times, at times during the season when he's going up against better defenses, he struggled a little bit to really create shots inside, in the paint at the rim. And I think a lot of that was because Ohio State just didn't have a whole lot of talent around him. But I do think some of that was his defensive concerns, and he needed to become a little bit better of a ball handler, especially with his right hand. So I think there's some concern that he's not able to consistently create against elite NBA defenders. But I think if he is able to, and he is able to become, that diverse offensive player, I think with his shooting and his passing, I do think he is one of the highest upside players in this draft.
Derek Bodner is, of course, talking Sixers with us at Derek Bodner NBA. Earlier today, we talked to Jerry Zagoda out in Minnesota. He says 95% chance that it is going to be Towns. Would you agree that Towns will be one?
Yeah, it does look like Towns is one. Flip Saunders has been a big Jahlil Okafor fan. He's always been a big Jahlil Okafor fan. But there's a lot of guys in that Minnesota organization that have been pushing for Karl Towns. He came in. They Flip Saunders witnessed a workout with Towns earlier in the month. Came away very impressed, and they had him in Minnesota this past week. And from what I've been told, that pretty much sealed the deal. It's almost a foregone conclusion. All
right, number 2 is then the obvious wild card here with the Lakers. In your opinion, did they go Okafor?
I think they do end up going Okafor, yeah. I think it's going to end up being the two big men going at the top of the draft, kind of like we all expected. I think in the end, this isn't as certain of a thing as Towns to Minnesota is, but I do think the Lakers end up going with Okafor.
All right, that would leave the Sixers.
Whoever ends up drafting at second ends up going with Okafor.
So you're buying a little bit more into this DeMarcus Cousins stuff?
Well, I'm sure there's been some discussions about it. I'm not sure if something like that is going to materialize within the next 2 days. But, I don't think it's impossible that, the Lakers go for, a trade like that where they can really get, DeMarcus Cousins is, if you want to call Anthony Davis a power forward, which, making that distinction isn't always necessary, but he's one of the best centers in the league. So I could certainly see the Lakers pursuing something like that if it's actually available and if, George Karl is already, moving on from Cousins.
So Russell then would be available. Porzingis, Winslow, Hazonia is another guy. Moutier, those would be the next group of guys. Would they be the only guys in play at 3 for the Sixers?
Well, I think, to me, if I had to handicap it, I think Russell's probably the favorite and Porzingis is probably, behind him. I think those two are I would be surprised if it doesn't come down to one of those two.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of other people, I think Moutier is still in play. And I could see Winslow and Hazonia both being under consideration as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's among those guys.
I know we talked about that yesterday a little bit, but Moutier's name doesn't come up a whole heck of a lot. And, they are different type of players. One's a little bit more physical, playing over there in China. We don't know a whole heck of a lot, but, that he did play professional basketball, and that could be something that, he's a little bit more prepared to play that game and be a professional. Russell, we saw a lot more of. I don't know. They are two different type of guys. I'm really intrigued by the fact that Moutier's name has not been surrounded by this team a whole heck of a lot. That to me is very intriguing.
And look, I've always kind of sided towards Russell in this. If Moutier ended up being the pick, I would not be upset. I do think he is a legitimate top 5 prospect in this draft, and in most years he's probably a top 3 prospect in the draft. I do think he has a very high talent level. I have Russell a little bit more, but would I be upset if Moutier ended up being the pick? No. I actually think this is a pretty deep draft in the 3 through 7 range. So there's a lot of options, that's for sure.
All right. So at the 3 spot in your USA Today mock draft, you had Russell, correct?
Yep.
4 you went with to the Knicks. Who'd you take?
4 to the Knicks. Who did I take? That's a good question. I think I went Justice Winslow. I flip-flopped Justice Winslow and Willie Cauley-Stein in recent weeks. There's interest from the Knicks in both of them. But I think my latest one had Justice Winslow in it. I should probably look that up, though.
So Winslow, you like going to the Knicks, and then that would leave Orlando, who everybody thinks likes Porzingis, and I would assume that's who then you would have going there. I think you're right.
Yeah,
I remember that being Porzingis going to 5.
Yep, Porzingis is at 5.
All right.
That one I do know.
All right, and then Sacramento at 6. A lot of people like Hezonja here. How about you?
Hezonja's a possibility. I think this is probably where Emmanuel Mudiay falls, though. I think this is probably his floor. I can't really see him falling much lower. Maybe he falls one more to the Nuggets at 7. But I think at this point, Mudiay is too talented of a prospect to fall anymore. And I think the drop, if the Sixers don't take him at 3, then I think he probably does fall to 6, because I don't think he fits what the Knicks are looking for in a triangle point guard. And the Magic have, they have their point guard already. So I think this is probably where his fall stops.
All right, Derek Bodner's with us. Give us the information that you have. I know there's not a lot on this possible breach of the CBA by the Sixers.
From what I understand, there's just some, basically the second round contract, and I haven't gotten this fully confirmed, but there's some rumblings, I'll say, that it's a second round contract structure that Sam Hinkie likes to offer, that he offered to Jeremy Grant, that Hollis Thompson signed, that he ended up getting a very similar contract to Robert Covington, and that KJ McDaniels turned down. So I don't think it, from what I understand, at least if it is that, then I don't really see it as a breach of the CBA. So that's why I'm kind of uncertain of what the full ramifications of the allegations are. But, at least from my knowledge, I don't know of anything that they've broached. But it's something that if you want change, is probably going to end up coming up during the next CBA negotiations.
Mm-hmm.
But, this is still something that kind of has to flesh itself out what the full scope of the allegations are.
All right. Obviously, the draft on Thursday night. We'll see what happens. It looks like Towns 1, most likely Okafor 2. Then the Sixers have their shot at taking, their guy at number 3. The last couple of years, Derek, let me ask you, I said earlier, they've lucked out. They got the best player, I think, the last 2 years. Noel was probably the best player with the 6th pick. Last year, Embiid probably, we don't know yet, but might be the best player with the 3rd pick. It doesn't look like that's going to happen for them this year because Towns is probably the best player. But they've got, arguably the best player the last 2 years in the draft.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I did have Winslow at 4. I just double-checked that. But, yeah, no, going into both those last 2 drafts, that was going to bother me if I didn't check it. I did have Noel rated, as the best prospect before the draft, and I did have Embiid rated as the best prospect before the 2015 or 2014 draft. So yeah, I think they lucked out. We'll see if luck actually plays out that way because of Joel's injuries. But no, I think I've said all along that I think Karl Anthony Towns is the best prospect in this draft. So I think that streak probably ends on Thursday night. But I think there's some good talent, especially Russell.
Yeah, go ahead. No, let me ask you this: if that deal we talked about, 23, are there guys in that area that intrigue you?
Yeah, I think there's some good talent. One of the guys that seems like he's kind of falling a little bit is Kevon Looney, a power forward from UCLA. But he's a kind of athletic, versatile defensive forward that I think Sam Hinkie could have, a lot of interest in. I think there are some point guards that could be there, guys such as DeLon Wright from Utah, guys like Jerry and Grant. R.J. Hunter, I think, could be an interesting piece because the Sixers need shooting that bad. Justin Anderson, he's a shooting guard.
I like him a lot.
Yeah, no, he went from basically like a 25% three-point shooter his sophomore season to about a 45% three-point shooter during his junior season. And that, to me, changed his standing as a prospect completely because he's such a good defender that he really just needed to become a threat from the three-point line. He said a lot of his improvement was just by taking better shots and being a little more selective and a little smarter about his shot selection. So I think he's another name that could be interesting. And there's a couple of big men, guys like Christian Wood, power forward from UNLV, guy who can shoot a little bit from the perimeter and also block some shots. And also Chris McCullough, which would be hysterical because he's out with a torn ACL, which is a big reason why he's fallen. But you know what? It's a Sam Hinkie type of move. Move up, get him. He's a good prospect, but you might not see him next year.
Yeah, and Anthony Brown's another guy that I have some interest in too. The kid from Stanford. He is a senior too. That might not work with the Sam Hinkie way. He's a little too old, right? Being a senior, how dare you?
Yeah, well, I think I think if he's looking at it and he can get that guy tied into a 4-year contract, you can get him throughout his physical prime at basically peanuts. So I don't think he's going to rule out pretty much anybody in that scenario.
That was the one thing somebody mentioned about Noel and Marcus Smart is that Noel's contract would end 1 year earlier, that they can have control of Smart longer. And if you didn't think you were going to win in the next 2 or 3 years, that could be something that you do take into consideration.
Yeah, I think ultimately, though, I think they end up going with whichever prospect they have the most, most confidence in long term. Especially with the salary cap that's going to rise, I don't think that increase is going to be the driving force in any trade.
He's Derek Bodner at Derek Bodner NBA. For more on the Sixers draft, make sure you're following him. Draft night, he'll be live at the NBA draft, and of course, we'll be all over it the next couple of days. The draft live on 97.3. All right, Derek, thanks, man.
Yep, have a good one.